bad publishers, bad practices, bad games, and good advice. Cutting words. The current state of gaming hardware is, let's charitably say, interesting. Between the big three of Microsoft's Xbox, Sony's PlayStation, and Nintendo's Switch, we're seeing a fair degree of stagnation and a wait-and-see attitude on how things might change. Inversely, on the PC front, we're experiencing the shakeup of new processing horsepower, but between multiple economic factors, tariffs, inflation, scalpers, orange idiots, etc., hardware for reasonable prices is beyond the access of most consumers. So today, I wanted to take a look at each of the major players, how we got to where we are, and what I think we can expect moving into the future. Like my intro, let's start with the Xbox and Microsoft in general. For the last few years, I think the general consensus is that Xbox has been struggling. Not Microsoft, Xbox. Don't forget, Xbox is a small facet of the mega corporation that is Microsoft, and if one section is struggling, it has other divisions to fall back on. So while trying not to lose money, Microsoft can absolutely afford some difficulty. But why has Xbox been struggling? In spite of the Red Ring of Death fiasco, the Xbox 360 was killing it during its generation. Well, while not the only cause, I believe a good portion of Xbox's issues began with one person, Don Mattrick. During E3 of 2013, Don took to the stage to announce the features of the next generation of Xbox. Features such as locking physical games to a system, always online DRM, an emphasis on TV and media for their gaming brand of products, and if you didn't have internet, you could just stay on the 360 like a filthy plebeian?
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360, that's your message if you don't, like it?
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device.
He left Microsoft a couple months later. I cannot understate the damage to perception that Mattrick had as the president of Xbox. To take the gaming brand, and then to state the intention to remove several of the features that people turn to consoles for, was nothing if not a slap in the face of gaming consumers, and the course he was leading Xbox on was likely not something that could be reversed quickly. Not the always online and DRM statements, though. Xbox walked those back in a matter of days. But that was just one aspect near the start. So, what else has been going on? Let's look at another thing that has been waning for the Xbox in the last 2 years. Console exclusives. Back in the day, what were the heavy hitters? Halo, Gears of War, Forza, and the real classics, Fusion Frenzy and the Burger King games. Jokes aside, most of those games were system sellers, titles good enough to justify the cost of a console, but as time went on, they either stopped focusing on exclusives, or the quality of their respective franchises diminished. And let me be clear on my stance for console exclusives. They are not pro-consumer. They are a company holding something you want to ransom and telling you that you need to go to them to get it. It is not a friendly or healthy consumer relationship, and this goes for any of the players in the console space. But anyway, over time, Xbox's lack of exclusivity and general practice of eventually also releasing their games on PC revealed how few reasons there were to stick to their machine. And you'd think their relatively recent acquisitions of Bethesda and Activision Blizzard would be setting up a new golden era for making people come to them to play exclusive titles. But no, they keep on doing multi-platform releases. Great for selling games, terrible for selling consoles. But that leads me to some speculation. While not certain, I believe Xbox may be gearing up to try and do a late 2020s equivalent to what Sega pulled back in the day. I think they may be looking to diminish or outright conclude their work in the hardware space for gaming, and instead focus on publishing games or trying to draw people into their ecosystem with things like Game Pass. Interesting, but personally and from the ecosystem standpoint, considering I don't pay for Game Pass, canceled my Xbox Live subscription, and my paltry library of recent Xbox purchases, I don't see that path as terribly viable. As a publisher, maybe, but that's also predicated on the notion that the console space is going to remain healthy, and we have another player in that space that, as a console, is still putting Xbox to shame. The PlayStation is probably the most stable higher-end console right now, but is also experiencing issues of its own. Some similar to what Xbox is having, and some completely unique to it. What's the same? Well, a lack of truly exclusive titles for one. At the time of writing, the only AAA game that is playable only on a PlayStation 5 is the Demon's Souls remake. Looking at backwards compatibility, there's a handful of other titles, but a handful of aging titles does not a system seller make. And given that any new exclusives tend to only be timed, I see one less reason to stay in the Sony ecosystem, hence why I also no longer pay for PlayStation Plus. But let's look at PlayStation's other problem. As far as I can tell, Sony is suffering from their own success. But that's not to say they're doing things well. It's by simple virtue they aren't consistently messing up like Xbox, and with no direct competition, they may be getting complacent and stagnant. No major innovations, no desire to shake things up, and not feeling threatened in their position. I say they have no direct competition because Nintendo has been doing its own thing for a long time. Speaking to which, the Nintendo Switch. The current hardware generation is feeling quite long in the tooth, with ports to it having to make some hefty concessions to run properly. However, the Switch 2 allegedly being on the horizon and supposedly being mostly backwards compatible at least keeps me interested. Nintendo is also the only one of the big three players that maintain system exclusives, militantly so, to where they are outright hostile to their fan base, going after modders and fan projects. That's why I largely don't cover games that only come out on Nintendo Switch. But the overall high quality of games you can get with Nintendo, along with the convenient form factor options of handheld or docked to the TV, means in all likelihood, if a new console generation were to launch tomorrow, the only one I'd buy is the Switch. But let's not forget, there's another player in the hardware space. Maybe not to the same degree, but one I feel we should pay attention to. Steam is already the most prominent digital game distributor, so Valve and their Steam Deck were already poised to be in a strong position. However, recent moves in releasing a Steam OS for consumer machines makes me think they're preparing for one of two moves. One, they're going to try again at the Steam Box concept or a Valve console, or two, they're preparing to take on Microsoft and their dominance in the Windows operating system space. Either way, I'm interested. Maybe not for the Steam Box, since I've already built my own, but the attempt to take on Microsoft and force them to actually make Windows 11 better would absolutely be good for consumers, and PC gamers are already in a good position. PC gaming is going through a very good time, and with Xbox and PlayStation both stagnating and sharing their big games, I can see why. Right now, the only really big upside to consoles is the initial required investment. A PS5 or a Series X is about $500 and requires a lot less intimate knowledge to get up and running, whereas an entry-level new gaming PC is hard to come by for less than $800. That $300 difference can also cover a handful of games and accessories. But, as PC gamers can tell you, over time it's cheaper to be in the PC space. While both consoles and PC need internet access and its associated cost, consoles then have to charge monthly for their multiplayer access. Then there's sales, discount bundle sites, and the upgradability of your hardware that allows you to move with the notion of console generations without having to divorce from libraries or system-exclusive stores. Unfortunately, now is also probably one of the worst times from a hardware perspective for PC building or upgrading because of all the previously mentioned economic factors. GPUs are hard to come by, parts are constantly being threatened to be tariffed to hell and back, and the uncertainty of the market is generating a whole bunch of volatility. Nonetheless, if you have interest, PC gaming is often the better long-term option. Of a brief side note, if you're the kind of individual who plays on PC and belittles others for playing on console, just fuck off. Alright, the PC gaming master race elitist snob crowd already causes enough problems. If they're gaming on a device and that makes them happy, who cares what device it is? If they want to know more about PC gaming, be positive and share it with them. I am so sick of this PC gaming master race elitist snobbery shithead attitude. Getting back on track, I'd like to refocus on that Steam Box speculation. Emphasis on the word speculation for this section. While unlikely, they'd be in the best position to enter the console space and potentially force Microsoft out. They've already shown a willingness to dabble in different hardware endeavors, and also already have the infrastructure and finances to sell games to most anyone with an internet connection. I don't imagine it would be terribly hard for them to initiate their own kind of physical media that you could order from the Steam store page. But anyway, finally, let's move on to some potential predictions or what I'd like to see happen. For Xbox, I see them getting out of the hardware space as the most viable option, and being a developer, publisher, and distributor. To go back to making their titles exclusive, while good for hardware sales, would be very unlikely to not cause backlash. For PlayStation, unless they royally screw up, I see them maintaining maintaining dominance for the near future, until the lack of exclusives also causes interest to wane. For Nintendo, they're always going to march to the beat of their own drum, so I'm just not going to bother with them. For the PC space in general, hopefully the market will course correct. For Valve, they're also infamously difficult to pin down, but I'd at least like to see them try being a devoted player in the console space. Finally, for the gaming industry as a whole, and specifically on the development and publishing side, I think we're going to see a crash very soon. We're already seeing some signs. Ubisoft seems to have pulled out of a tailspin with the latest Assassin's Creed, but only barely. The major development and publishing players have all fallen into something of a trap. They've hooked onto the live service train, and now there are about a dozen live service titles that they have to keep focusing on to maintain revenue. But it becomes kind of like that robot art display that had to mop up hydraulic fluid to keep itself running. Just replace the hydraulic fluid with support for a single game. Eventually, it won't be enough. Fortnite, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six Siege, and multiple other titles keep needing to find ways to monetize, and feeding the live service demon is the strategy they keep settling on. This means new, interesting, or innovative titles are rare from the major studios, but what happens if the big players start to consistently fail? When their live services can no longer sustain them? When there's nothing more they can milk from their audience? I think a crash is coming. I just don't know exactly when. But before I conclude today, what do you think? Do you think console makers are in the same space that I'm openly declaring right here, or is there some factor that I've not taken account for? Either way, I'd like to hear your opinion on things. But either way, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a crossfire machine that I need to contemplate. Hey, thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. Remember that I give away Steam keys with my regular weekly uploads, and all you have to do to enter is leave a comment and have contact info on your YouTube profile. But as always, thanks for watching, and keep your head on your shoulders.